of the Golden Age cantors, or specifically doing some of the Jewish influence on music was the last session that we did here in America. Around the Great American Songbook, Irving Berlin, Cole Porter. Today's topic has absolutely nothing to do with Yiddishkeit, other than the fact that your Chazan in residence loves it. So that's really the only connective tissue that I could come up with, instead of trying to like be a bar mitzvah kid and force the, oh, look at this, mom's on the Zoom call. I didn't even, she's in the other room. I thought she was gonna be sitting, okay. Hey mom, that's cool. No, but instead of just focusing in on, trying to force this into a square peg in a round hole and come up with some theme like a bar mitzvah boy, I figured let me just talk to you about a composer that I'm personally really passionate about. So I'm going to go ahead, as usual, I have a little screen share. Let's get this all set up. Okay. Very exciting. Okay. Schubert, my favorite composer. Can everybody see that? Can I get a thumbs up, Rabbi, if you get, okay, cool. So that is today, June 2nd at noon. So let's start off, because I know that, I've talked to a lot of folks in the shul, and what's really exciting for me always is that we have so many congregants that are actual opera subscribers, people that love and enjoy classical music. But I also know that there's a lot of folks that just don't listen to classical music. And so I thought, let me just start there. So why do I care about classical music? Why did I, as a 16-year-old growing up in Portsmouth, Virginia, fall madly in love with classical music? The way that I like to think about it is I know that I have a hard time focusing and paying attention on stuff. So if music doesn't command my full attention, I lose focus. So what I mean by that is, you know how when we're watching a movie and the music is in the background, it's a soundtrack, or music just kind of comes as a background thing. It accompanies Jeopardy. We have the Jeopardy theme, but we're not really listening to music. We're not kind of just sitting down and listening to music as a course by itself. It's an accompaniment for something else to kind of color another experience. For me personally, I don't like listening to music as a background thing. And any of my friends will tell you that it's frustrating sometimes to be in the car with me, because if the radio is on, I have a hard time focusing on what you're telling me. We're having a conversation, because I'm really focusing in on the music and breaking it down. So I love listening to something and immersing myself in it all the way. Now, one of the things about popular versus classical music for me is that a lot of popular music is highly repetitive. And sometimes that's awesome. I mean, you can get a great song, a great popular song, and just have it repeat that same 3 or 4 chords. Anybody who plays a little bit of guitar will tell you that if you learn how to play a G chord, a C chord, and a D chord, you know probably about half of the rock songs ever written. You can play them, those 3 chords. A 4-minute song by Schubert contains more musical material than a double-sided album. It's just all packed down and all the fat is trimmed away, and we're going to look at some of that musical material today. So that's kind of that's my pitch for why I'm interested in the classical music, because I just don't want to listen to the same 2 bars of music again and again and again and again. Once I got to the end of those 2 bars of music, I want some new ideas. So that's what we're going to look at today. So Franz Schubert, specifically, why is he one of my favorite composers of all time? It has to do with the quality of his music. In order to understand a little more about his music, we're going to have to learn just a little bit about his life. So we're going to spend just a few minutes talking. I'm just going to set you up, learning a little bit about Schubert's life. And then from there, we're actually going to, I've got a little piano right here. I'm going to sit down. We're going to break up some of these songs, look at some of the music together, and I'll even try to sing through a few of these. Hopefully the internet connection and everything on Zoom will be good enough for that. So Schubert, one thing right away that you'll notice just looking at this slide, 1797, 1828. Died when he's 31, a very, very short life. One of the things that always attracted me to Schubert as a musician, as a singer, was that he wasn't really known as an opera composer as much, although he did write some operas. He wrote a ton of songs. And when I'm talking about songs, we're going to look at some of these today. I mean classical composed songs that are for piano and singer, and that's it. So for me, as a musician, if I want to go and perform a leading role in an opera, well, I have to find an orchestra, a chorus, an opera company, hundreds of people to put together this big production. Whereas if I wanted to perform Schubert, all I needed was a pianist. And I could go with a pianist into a practice room and we could make Schubert's music come to life, just the two of us. Now, as I've been practicing piano a little bit more in quarantine, what's fun is that I can actually perform some of these things just on my own. And this is actually what Schubert wrote. So let's just take a minute to just talk about Schubert's life. I promise I'm not going to get in some dry, boring history lesson, but this is a fascinating life. And I just want to share just a little bit about Schubert, the man, with all of you. So first of all, to understand Schubert, you have to understand his obsession with this figure, Goethe. Many of you will have heard the name Goethe. If you haven't, he's one of the most important figures in really Western literature. He wrote thousands and thousands and thousands of poems and sonnets and books. And in fact, one of the most important things he wrote came in 1774, the Sorrows of Young Werther. A lot of people will call it Werther, mistakenly say Werther. But the significance of this book by Goethe, and Schubert fell under this spell, was this was the first time that you had this hero that wasn't sort of this epic hero, but it was somebody who was struggling with their emotions, was an artist. He was kind of one of these anemic Enlightenment anti-heroes, somebody who falls in love with a woman that he can't have, and then just spends his whole time obsessing over it. And at the end of the book, Werther takes his own life. This was a really important book in the history of Europe, because in 1774, when this book was published and came out, young men all throughout Germany and all of Europe, but especially within Germany, got copies of the Sorrows of Young Werther and opened the book to the page on which Werther commits suicide, and they would commit suicide. Tens of thousands of young men all throughout Germany became obsessed with this figure. No one in literature had ever captured really their pain, their feelings of not being loved, and their frustrations, because everything in literature was the idea of this Übermensch, what you're supposed to be. So Schubert came under the spell of Goethe, and specifically a poem that he wrote called The Erlking. The Erlkönig, which is the Erl King, is a mythical figure in German mythology, and you can see here in this picture, the Erl King is chasing after a father who is riding a horse carrying his son, and the Erl King is trying to lure the son away from the father, and they're riding faster and faster to get away. And at the end of the poem, the Erl King captures the boy. But it's a phenomenal poem. And Schubert himself decided at 17 years old that he was going to set Goethe's great Erlking poem to music. So he decided to do this because of this concept, whether something's strophic or through composed. So I promise this is all going to come clear to you in a second. But before Schubert, everybody had been writing strophic songs. What do I mean by strophic? Strophic means it has a verse or a strophe. So think, Michael rowed the boat ashore, hallelujah, Michael rowed the boat, yada-dee-da-da-da-da. You know, you change the words, same exact music. Okay, Danny Boy, the pipes are calling, but when you come and all the, you know, it's the same exact music, but with different words. So if the poem changes from the beginning of the poem, there's a middle section that's a little different, the end, it's the same exact music. The music never develops. And Schubert was really frustrated with that and said, I want to do something new. So I'm going to write through composed music, where the music that fits the first part of the poem doesn't work for the latter part of the poem. So the music has to evolve. And he came up with through composed German songs. So I put Bohemian Rhapsody on here because this is the great example in popular music that people are like, oh, I get it, Bohemian Rhapsody. If you know that song by Queen, you know, you're like, Galileo, Galileo, Figaro, you know, it has all these weird sections in it, but it doesn't repeat the same music like 99% of popular songs do. So the significance with Erlkönig is that Schubert decided to take a stab at 17 years old at changing the world with this through composed style. And he composed, that's actually the original manuscript there, Erlkönig, which is one of his iconic songs. There is actually the printed version on the right that a singer would work from today, but you can actually see Schubert's writing there on the left. It's pretty neat, actually, for a composer. Most composers, if you look at Beethoven's manuscripts, they look like complete chicken scratch. So one quick question, though. Wait a minute, I don't speak any German. So how are we going to follow what's going on here in these songs? Well, that is where the beauty of the art song really comes in. What Schubert does in the Erlking is he portrays a different character. There's 4 different characters within the song, and each character has different music that goes along with it. So that's one clue. You'll be able to say immediately, oh, this is the father singing. Oh, this is the son. Oh, this is the Erlking. So I'm going to give you an example of this now and play you really one of the greatest interpreters of art song, a guy by the name of Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, passed away about probably 9 years ago. But he was one of the great, great German baritones of all time. And here he is singing the Erlking. There's going to be texts and translations and subtitles underneath so you can follow what's going on. And I'll stop to give you a few little comments. But here we go. This is the Erlking. So I'm going to pause right away. So before we even get to the singer, we see in the piano, to me, and I think most musicians would agree, that's a horse galloping through the woods. We can hear the sound of the horse beating the pavement as it goes through, and you can hear that right in the piano. So he's trying to use the piano to capture what's happening. Sorry, having a little technical stuff here.
Wir reiten so spät durch Nacht und Wind. Es ist der Vater mit seinem Kind. Hat den Knaben wohl in dem Arm. Fasst ihn sicher, hält ihn warm.
That's the narrator. Now is the father.
Ein Sohn, was spürst du so lang dein Gesicht?
Now the child.
Siehst Vater, du, den Erlkönig nicht. Den Erlenkönig mit Krohn und Schein.
Now the father.
Mein Sohn, es ist ein Nebelstreich.
Now the Erlking.
Du liebes Kind, komm, geh mit mir, gar schöne Spiele spiel ich mit dir.
So I'm not going to play the song until the end, but I wanted to give you just a quick example of a master song interpreter really doing some of Schubert's greatest work. The Erlkönig, as I mentioned, he wrote when he was 17. When he finished the Erlking, he brought it to Goethe as a 17-year-old, the great Goethe, And Goethe rejected his work and told him that it wasn't really a good song because it wasn't strophic the way that all of these previous songs had been. So completely destroyed by being rejected by Goethe, he then goes and loses himself in his work. Schubert, he was 5 feet tall. His friends nicknamed him the Little Mushroom. He dealt with rejection his whole life. He was forced to take a job at his father's music school at 17 years old to be a teacher. And all of the students made fun of him because he was younger than all of the students. He suffered from a mental disorder. He had severe mood swings, hypomania, depressive episodes. He had fevers and skin rashes. He actually was checked into the Vienna hospital for this, and that was where he wrote a lot of his great music. So he became such an introvert that by the time he was 21 years old, he was unable to find any woman that would consider him as an actual suitor, and he began seeing prostitutes. He contracted syphilis at 21, and the treatment at the time was mercury. They would actually lock patients in a sealed room, and they would cover their bodies with mercury, and they were unable to change their bed sheets or their clothes. And they thought that this would actually help deal with syphilis, but then it wound up just killing you from mercury poisoning. It was a horrible way to go. But all during this period, again, remember he died at 31. So there's a period of about 12 years. I want to show you just how prolific Schubert really was. And to do that, I'm going to show you here. This is a list of songs I just pulled up on Wikipedia by Franz Schubert. So I'm just going to scroll through to give you a sense here. Keep in mind, these are all individual full works that Schubert wrote, died at 31 years old. So you're talking about 12 or 13 years of musical compositions. These are all full compositions and songs. I could keep scrolling for days and days. By the time he died, he had written over 740 songs. One of the most prolific, incredible composers. So I just thought it would be kind of fun to just scroll through. This is on Wikipedia. Anybody can pull that up. That's just a list of Schubert's compositions. So what I wanted to actually do now that you know a little bit about Schubert is to go ahead and actually look at some of his specific songs. Schubert, the song cycles of Schubert are something that's especially dear to me. And this is a fun little thing. This is the only review I ever got as a singer in French. But this was when I was in France. I went with a pianist to go and perform some Schubert Lieder. And you can see they're talking just immediately about the whole, he accomplished the performance of doing the entire cycle of songs. This was 24 Schubert songs meant to be performed together. So it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. I love it. So let's go ahead. What I wanted to do today, I thought would be really interesting. When Schubert passed away, he was relatively unknown. In 1828. It was really later composers that rediscovered his works and championed it. So he never really got the success in his lifetime that he deserved. So he winds up then with all these songs that publishers discover and they publish after he dies. This is the grouping, the final grouping of Schubert songs that was put out. They were thought to be his very last songs. So we're going to have a chance to look at kind of the mature Schubert. And we're going to pull a few specific, Lisa asked an awesome question, which I'm going to talk about in a second. I'm going to pick a few specific songs here to show you just the greatness of Schubert. I'm not going to do all of these, of course. We're just going to handpick a few, and we're going to sort of rip them apart. So the first one I want to look at with you is Krieger's Ahnung. You'll see on the screen there, that's number 2. I put here also the poets who wrote the poems that Schubert then set to music. The first 7 songs were Rellstab, then Heine did the next 6, And the final one was this poem, this poet named Seidel, Josef Seidel. But Krieger's Ahnung, this is actually the text for Krieger's Ahnung. When I actually do the song in a minute, I'm going to leave this on the screen so that you can follow along with the text so you know what's going on. But basically, and forgive me for going quickly through this, I'm not going to leave you time to read this whole thing right now. It'll be up while I do the song, as I mentioned. But I do want to go through a few specific moments within the song. And actually, I'm going to move over my little display here and get all set up. Give me just 1 second to do this. Okay, here we are at the piano. Okay, can everybody hear me okay over here? Are we all, okay, good. So here's what I wanted to do. This is actually my copy of Schubert's songs are published in editions called Band, Band 1, the volume 1. This is just one of about 9 books of Schubert's songs that singers can get. You can see here mine has been through some better days. It's dog-eared and all, falling apart and taped together in different places, but I get nervous when I find a clean copy of music. It means you haven't done your homework. So I like a messed up score. It means it's been loved. So the song Krieger's Ahnung is one of these epic Schubert songs where it's telling the story of a bunch of soldiers around a campfire. And so they're getting ready to go into battle. But you get the sense from Schubert as the song progresses, he's not just talking about a physical war. He's talking about an internal battle. And he's looking back towards this beloved, this mysterious woman that Schubert always is obsessed with. And, how can he possibly go into battle? So there's a few things that happen in the music. So you have here right away this opening kind of theme. And even if you can't read music, I put this on the page here for you because you'll be able to understand this. This is a heartbeat. You hear that? So his heart is beating. In tiefer Ruhe liegt Michael, der Waffenbrüder Kreis. So this is your first idea, right? Your first section. But this is a through composed song. So we can't use that same music for the rest of it. What happens now, we're getting to this middle section where he's thinking back how much he misses his beloved. So around the campfire, you get this new feeling. You can almost hear the flames flickering up. Die hab ich oft so süß geträumt, an ihren Busen fahr, an ihren Busen fahr. So it's a different feeling. But then, as you see towards the very bottom of the page, where he says that she was laying in my arm, lag sie in meinem Arm. So you get this. I'm going to go to the next page here. So we get this figure where the flames here. Now he's not in his dreams. He's back in reality around the campfire. So here, der Flammen düstre Schein, ach, nur auf Waffen spielt. So he's now getting ready for war. You can hear it in the music. It's changing. So he's saying, here, fühlt die Brust. Here, your heart feels so alone. He's getting ready. Hier fühlt die Brust sich sich ganz allein. Hier fühlt die Brust sich ganz allein. Die Erinnerungsträne gilt, die Erinnerungsträne gilt. Now it changes. See, it now changes. Something different is happening in the music. So this is a through composed song. He's saying, your heart, don't let your consolation let up. You know, stay battle hardened. Get ready for war. You're going into battle. So you have this, es ruft noch manche Schlacht. There are battles ahead of you. So he says this, es ruft noch manche Schlacht. And then it changes again to this other section. Now he's thinking, soon I will rest. Bald ruhig ich wohl und schlafe fest, das liebste gute Nacht, das liebste gute Nacht. So that's the idea, and at the very end of the song, and I'm about to do it for you now that you know how the song all goes. But at the very end of the song, you'll notice after all that galloping, almost like the horse or something comes into the station. Your heartbeat again. So that's the idea of this song. It's a through composed song, and I'm going to do it for you now, okay? This is Krieger's Ahnung by Schubert, and hopefully with that little bit of explanation of what you're listening for in the song, you'll enjoy it a little bit more. So here we go. Das Herz so lang und schwer, so bang, so schwer, von Sehnsucht mir so heiß, von Sehnsucht mir so hab ich oft so süß geträumt an ihren Busen warm, an ihren Busen warm, wie freundlich schien es ihr des Blut, lag sie in meinen Armen, lag sie in meinen Armen. Ihr holt ja Flammen, düstere Schein, ach, nur auf Waffenspiel ganz allein. Hier füllt die Brust sich ganz allein. Die Erinnerungsträg wild, die Erinnerungsträne wild. Herz, dass ihr Trost dich nicht verlässt, dass ihr Trost dich nicht verlässt, es ruft noch manche Schlacht. Bald ruh ich wohl und schlafe fest, das liebste gute Nacht, das liebste gute Nacht. Herz, das ihr Trost sich nicht verlässt, dass ihr Trost sich nicht verlässt. Es ruft noch manche Schlacht. Bald ruh ich wohl und schlafe fest, Herz liebste gute Nacht, Herz liebste gute Nacht. Herz liebste gute Nacht. So that is Krieger's Ahnung by Schubert. That's number 2 in the 14-song set Schwanengesang. Schwanengesang is German for swan song. So it was not a title that Schubert himself actually put on the music. This was a publisher afterwards that said, hey, I want to make some money. I'm going to take these songs by Schubert and put them together in this edition and call it Schwanengesang. So the next song I'll do for you is also from Schwanengesang. This one you will probably, if you're familiar with any of the songs, it will be this one. It is Ständchen, which literally means a serenade. So what I'll point out, and again, I'll do the same thing here where I'll go through a couple just quick things in the music, and then I'll leave the text up for you. But essentially, this is just a love song. This is someone serenading, just a Ständchen, a serenade, serenading their beloved. You could even think of them as opening a window or something, or Haya and Jacob Verone would tell me how they would, it was a tradition in Mexico City that you would go to Plaza Garibaldi in Mexico City and have the mariachis come and serenade your girlfriend underneath their window. And if she opened her window, that meant that you were in. So this is the same type of idea. So I'm kind of picturing the Verones here or something. This is, the mariachi here doing the little piano bit. It actually sounds like the guitar. So the opening, think of this as an actual plucked guitar. So think. And then you all know this. Leise fliehen meine Liebe durch die Nacht zu dir. And then echo. Durch die Nacht zu dir. So that's a common thing you'll hear. The piano echoed, I sang durch die Nacht zu dir. And the piano does durch die Nacht zu dir. Can you hear that echo? So that comes in the music a lot. The only other thing I'll point out that's really musically interesting in this, because this actually is closer to a strophic song where there's a couple of verses. The thing that I'll point out that's really interesting is what happens when he gets hot and bothered, when he's all excited to see, ooh, maybe the window cracks open. So you notice here, we have at the top of the page, he's getting ready with this big phrase. He's a jedes weiche Herz. Now, las up near the second line on your page there, do you see? So you have las up dir die Brust bewegen. That crunchy chord, he's red and ripped up, right? Brust bewegen. And he breaks through here. Eben hab ich dir entgegen echo. And he says, come and make me happy. Come beglücke mich, make me happy, right? But do you think she makes him happy? Let's see. I mean, listen to the postlude. See if you think that he winds up getting what he's after here, okay? So I'll play you those last line. Komm, beglücke mich. What is this? So I'll leave that for you to decide. I mean, that's some of the stuff that I would sort of talk about with the pianist. We'd work on together. I'd say, well, what do you think? Do you think he winds up getting the girl at the end or maybe not? So this is Ständchen, and hope you guys enjoy this. Leise fliehen meine Lieder durch die Nacht zu dir. In den stillen Heidern ihre Liebchen, komm zu mir. Flüstern schlanke Wipfel rausche in des Mondes Licht, in des Mondes Licht. Des Verräters feindlich lauschen, böse Holde nicht, fürchte Holde nicht. Hörst die Nacht, die Gallen schlagen, ach, sie flehen dich. Mit der Töne süßen Klagen flehen sie für mich. Sie verstehen des Buses Seelen, kennen Liebesschmerz, kennen Liebesschmerz. Rühren mit der Silbertöne jedes weiche Herz, jedes weiche Herz,
lass auch dir die Brust bewegen. Liebe, na hör mal ich, elend hab ich dir entgegen. Beglücke mich, beglücke
So I'll leave it to you to decide whether or not he winds up getting the girl, but that's Ständchen. So I've chosen a couple other songs from Schwanengesang in particular that I think are especially beautiful. But before I do, I'd love to just get a sense, since this is my first time doing one of these live, on a Zoom call, just as far as the sound quality goes, I'd love to just get some feedback from anybody towards the end of the session. If anybody's having trouble hearing the piano versus the voice or something like that, go ahead and just send a message in the chat box so I can just collect this. I'd hope to be able to do more of these in the future where we could just kind of make some music and do this live, but I need to make sure we get kind of the technology right if we're going to keep doing that. So that would be helpful as we go. If anybody hears anything like, oh, I can't really hear him that well. So the next song I want to talk to you about is a really epic song that is, it starts off in der Ferne with this great musical motive that you have on the page. This is the third of the Rellstab songs that I'll do for you, the third and last that I'll do. What's interesting about this song, first of all, is you have this theme, which is what's on your screen right now, is this main musical theme. Loud. So that theme is, it shows up before each verse. There's 3 verses to this song, but it's not a strophic song. The way he sets the music is slightly different from verse to verse. So this song is about somebody who doesn't have a home, who feels lost in the world, and they're going from place to place. You'll hear even, this is the first verse. This is the actual musical idea that Schubert uses to express it. There are these kind of slow, almost funereal chords. And you'll notice, even if you don't read music, you should be able to notice that, hey, a lot of these notes seem to be on the lower part of the staff. They're not up on the top part of the staff. So that means I'm playing on the bottom part of the piano. So listen to these chords, right? You'll hear it immediately, this. So these are big, dark, ominous chords, right? And there's not a lot to it. And you notice it's 1, 2, 3, stop. Rhythmically. This is what Schubert's doing the whole song. I'll keep going. Fremde durch Messen, 1, 2, 3, long, bum, bum. 1, 2, 3, long. 1, 2, 3, long. It's the same thing over and over again. 1, 2, 3, singen ach, auf ihren Wegen nach. And it always ends with this very long phrase that seems to not know, it's like a train that doesn't know how to pull into the station. Auf ihren Wegen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120
Shalom.
then the same theme as before repeats. So this is the main theme, right? This is the verse that he sets up. Second verse, he modifies it. It's pretty much similar. I'm not going to play it. But the third verse, look at what happens in the piano. Even if you can't read music, I'm going to go back to the last slide. That's the piano in the first verse. That's the piano in the third verse. So if you can read a little music, one thing that you'll be able to notice is that the right hand and left hand are doing completely different things. So you have, that's the right hand. It's 4 notes, 4/16 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The left hand is doing triplets. Triplet, triplet. You hear how they're not lined up. The right hand and left hand have to be really independent. So what you're doing already, he's creating this feeling of anxiety. You don't have a home. You're going from place to place. And that happens in this rhythm. Now 2 in the left hand. And the right hand goes to 3, if you can follow that in the music. So, now together, they're both in 3. And he's saying, Die mir mit Schmerzach, the woman who hurt me, that you send to the one who has broken my heart, right? So you hear the pain right here. He says, Die mir mit Schmerzach. Here's the pain on the offbeat. 1, 2, and 3. And what harmony are we in? We're lost. So Schubert then goes on in this whole fabulous musical journey where he takes you from key to key and you go to all these meandering, strange places. And I want you to listen for that. I'm not going to show you all the musical examples because as usual, I get excited and then I run out of time on the hour. So I'm actually just going to do the song for you. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. With one thing I will point out is just the very final phrase has quite an ominous ending. And it's you can see there crescendo, even that's C-R-E-S-C, crescendo with those big bars to F-F, forte, forte, really loud is what that means. So end big. So we'll try to end as big as we can on Zoom. But let's give this a shot. This is In der Ferne. Welt hinausziehenden. Fremde durchmessenden, Heirat vergessenden, Mutterhaus hassenden, Freunde verlassenden, folget keine Segen, ach, auf ihren Wegen nach, auf ihren Wegen nach. Das Sehnende, Auge das Tränende. Sind
Sehnsucht nie endende, heimwärts sich wendende, Busen der fallende, Klage verhallende, Abendstern blinkende, hoffnungslos sinkende, hoffnungslos ihr säuselnden Wellen sanft kräuselnden Sonnenstrahl eilende, nirgend verweilende, dir mit Schmerz ach, die treue Herz zerbrach, ist von den fliehenden Welt hinausziehenden, Welt hinausziehenden. Hüfte hier säuselnden Wellen sanft kräuselnden, Sonnenstrahl eilende, nirgend die Schmerze ach, die treue Herz zerbrach, ist von den fliehenden Welt hinaus Welt hinausziehenden.
So that is one of my favorite songs. I love that, In der Ferne of Schubert. So it really gives a sense of the full imagination of Schubert. Now, I know that we only have just a few minutes left to spend together. So what I'm going to do is just skip to one of the really fascinating final songs that Schubert wrote. I'm going to go right to Doppelganger. If you've heard the term doppelganger before, of course, it's some, phantom double, as you've heard of the look-alike, whatever. But this is an interesting thing because it is really number 13 of 14. So it's one of the very, very final things Schubert wrote in his life. And you realize that all of these big piano things, with lots of notes and lots of accompaniment and stuff, it's so enormous. And then you get this. So even again, if you don't read music, you can see there are very few notes on the page. And the tempo indication, sehr langsam at the top, very slowly. You have to go through each one of these chords. So we have this big theme, right? There's this 4-chord theme. right? So that's your theme. And it keeps on using that theme over and over again, even towards the very bottom of the page. Here. Da steht auch ein Mensch und starrt in die Höhe. So you hear those are the same 4 chords throughout the whole song. But something happens in the next page, which is he breaks through finally when he realizes he's been looking at his own image in the mirror, and he's horrified by what he sees. So it's a really incredible song, Doppelganger, and it's one of the most fascinating things musically, because you would think at the end of his life, he could write anything he wanted, but the efficiency of the music that he wrote, he didn't have to waste time with all these flourishes. He's right at the business. So I'm going to end our session today with Doppelganger, one of Schubert's really iconic songs. I'm happy to stick around to answer some questions about Schubert or anything, but thanks again for joining me on this. Let's go ahead and listen to Doppelganger.
Die Nacht, es ruhen die Gassen in diesem Hause, wohnte mein Schatz. Sie hat schon längst die Stadt verlassen, doch steht noch das Haus auf demselben Platz. Da steht auch ein Mensch und starrt in die Höhe und ringt die Hände vor Schmerzensgewalt. Mir graust es, wenn ich sein Antlitz sehe. Der Mond zeigt mir eine eigene Gestalt. O Doppelgänger, du bleicher Geselle, was äffst du nach mein Liebesleid, das mich gequält auf diese Stelle? So manche Nacht, die alte Zeit.
So I want to thank all of you again for spending an hour with me. I really like doing these. It's fun to get to see your faces and feel, I mean, it's the closest thing we're going to get to a live concert for some time, I'm afraid. But thanks again. And I see I've got some comments here, so I'll go ahead and let's see.
Thank you, David.
Great. Yeah, so a couple questions that came on the chat. I'm happy to answer. The session's officially here. Let me stop the screen share. the session's officially finished, I suppose, but let's see here. So yeah, Martin is right. Nouns in German, whether proper or not, are all capitalized. So every noun in German would be capitalized. Has anybody's analyzed whether Schubert's compositions change after his mercury poisoning? Lisa, yeah, I'm realizing I didn't actually speak on that, but the actual final song that we heard, To Me, I think you can't imagine that mercury poisoning wasn't affecting his musical ability. And one thing I'll show you also is some of these songs. I mean, I don't know if you can see that. Look how few notes, Lisa, are on the page there. There's hardly anything to that. You know, you see there in the piano part, as compared to, let me just flip to like a different song earlier in his writing that can just give you a sense. I mean, this is just from a few years prior, just to look and see how many dots are on the page, you know, can give you almost everything you need to know. But fascinating guy, died when he was 31. You can only imagine after 740 songs, what an output that was.
I think Dave's hand was raised.
We had a hand. Sorry, what do we, how do I do? Do I have to do anything to get the hand?
Questions from the group, yeah.
There's a question from, I saw was his sister Clara Schumann. So Clara Schumann, so there's Schubert and Schumann. Clara Schumann was the wife of Robert Schumann, who was the composer who lived, he was actually around the same time as Schubert, but he lived much later. He lived into the 1850s. So it's, yeah, a lot of the tradition of German music, you talk about Beethoven, that goes to Schubert, that goes to Schumann, that goes to Brahms, and on from there into some of the bigger, more late romantic composers like Mahler. But really, we're talking about this interesting period before the Romantic. It kind of bridges classical music into the Romantic period, where music starts sounding expressive. It sounds like what it means. You know, it's no longer just focused on form and everything having to be, you know, beautifully symmetrical. Things can be a lot more expressive now. What's my opinion of the trout? I like it blackened, personally, with a little bit of lemon. For trout, I'm sorry, that's a little tongue-in-cheek. That's there's a great song by Schubert called Die Forelle, which is the trout. I think it's actually in this book somewhere. I'm not sure which, let me see, if I have it here, I'll give you just a lick of it. It's, it's just a song about a little fish that's kind of swimming around, and it's a really sweet song, very famous. You know, when you write 750 songs, and the thing that's amazing too, a lot of people don't realize this with Schubert, some of these songs were not just like these little 2 to 3, 4 minute songs. Some were like 30, 40 minute long compositions that are almost like symphonies, massive stuff. And that's just his songs we're talking about. We're not talking about all his chamber music, his piano music, his symphonic writing, it's incredible, the output of music.
And the way I'm hearing you relate to the music is they paint pictures for you in your imagination?
Yeah, well, I have a hard time, Rabbi, just like having music on kind of in the background where I'm not focused in on what it means. And I realize it's almost like a chicken and the egg thing where, am I not paying attention to it because it's not really worth my attention? Or am I not paying attention to it just, you know what I mean? Like it's hard to know. Like with Schubert, there's so much imagination and so many things you can rip apart. We just I raced through 1 or 2 songs, but we could spend hours on one page of a song and why is this note a G and this one is a D, and why would he change it? He's doing the same passage, but change this one note. So I love nerding out on that and really losing myself in the music. Yeah.
Also, it paints pictures is I was struck by the little fish swimming around, just that little sentence, that phrase, it was so pictorial.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun sometimes to think of, what something means in Schubert, these little phrases. Like there's this one that's meant to be a weather vane. It's like on top of a house that is turning, and it's this guy looking up at his beloved's house and saying, "How fitting that the weather vane keeps turning and is fickle, just like my beloved who used to be with me and now is with someone else." And so it's this like kind of beautiful thing, but you can even hear the way the wind blows in the song. It says, you can hear it like the rattling of the wind. So I would picture that always with my pianist. We'd think like, why is that note trilled? And yada yada da da. Is that a gust of wind? Yada yada da da. Yada yada da da. Yada yada da da. You know, and that's part of the fun. Yeah, Mark, I see Mark is on the call. Mark Garvin is a great musician. Oh, hey, how are you, Mark? Good to see you guys. Hey, Mark, did you play any? Did Schubert write anything that you could play on guitar, like any classical guitar stuff?
My understanding is that Schubert wrote on the guitar, but never composed anything for the guitar. So I know I've played some transcriptions here and there, but no major pieces. Yeah. So I don't know how much he did that. That could be a rumor in the guitar world, or it could be truth. Who knows? Could be fake news. I don't know.
I've seen a transcription of Winterreise, his that cycle that I was saying to everyone that I did in France, the 24 songs for guitar and baritone. But I can't imagine some of the stretches you would have to do to make. I mean, it would be crazy, right?
Yeah, you have to do some moving notes around a little bit, or grow another finger, one way or another.
Unless you're Paganini.
Right. Great to see you, David.
Great to see you too.
Thanks. I gotta run.
Yeah. Okay. Great to see everybody. I'm gonna sign off and.
Hi. Hey, it's 4:25.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, 4:28.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to put this down.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, that's 4:25. Thank you. May I have another straw? Thank you so much. And a napkin? Thank you. You too.